Book 101 is all about the Bookstarter Ride for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is award-winning and best-selling author, no other than Mr. Steve Anderson.
Hey, Daniel, how are you? Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Steve. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
I'd be happy to. My background actually is insurance, working with insurance agents on technology. That's actually what led me to write the book because we all know technology continues to develop rapidly. And I started asking the question, is the biggest risk businesses take actually not taking enough risk? And so that led me to researching companies, some that were very, very successful and are no longer here. So, what happened? Others have been successful and continue to be successful, and why? And so that led me to Amazon and the letters to shareholders that Jeff Bezos wrote as CEO of that company. Starting in 1997 was his first letter, and the book goes through the 2018 letter. The last letter he wrote as CEO was 2020, and reading those letters as a narrative, meaning like a book, almost 50,000 words, I realized there were threads going through those letters, not just touting Amazon, but how he grew Amazon, and that's what really captured my attention.
Indeed, how Mr. Bezos grew Amazon like a rapid fire. So, Mr. Steve, what inspired you to decode Jeff Bezos' shareholder letters into 14 universal growth principles?
Well, like I said, those threads I realized were at least intriguing to me. And my first iteration of of those ideas, was actually a lead gen, a PDF, one-page executive summary for each of the letters that he had published at that time. Highlights what I thought were key points. I thought businesses of all stripes, all kinds, could use that information because you know what, people are curious. How did Bezos do it? How did Amazon grow to what it is today? Well, fortunately, my wife is in the book business, and I talked to her about it, showed her what I was putting together, and she said, "That's not a lead gen. That's not a PDF giveaway. That is a book." And so that started about an 18-month journey of converting those ideas into what we published as the Bezos letters.
And Mr. Steve Anderson, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. Thank you for sharing this book to the world. And of the 14 principles, which one do businesses most often overlook and why it is transformative when applied?
I think that one of the key ideas in the book, and one of the key ideas at Amazon, and I think one of the reasons they have been so successful and continue to be successful, is actually the first principle. So let me set a little bit of a background. So 14 principles is a lot. So what I did was I grouped them into what I call cycles: test, build, accelerate, and scale. So, four cycles that I believe businesses go through all the time. Whether they're a new startup business, whether a small main street business, um, they're going through those cycles. And so I grouped the principles into those cycles. So I said the first cycle is test. I think what's overlooked most is the very first principle, which I call encourage successful failure. Now, you don't typically hear the words successful and failure used together, But I think that's actually a key at Amazon and can be a key at any business. What do I mean by that? There's a lot of experimentation that has to happen, certainly when you're starting out, but even as you're growing and getting bigger. And Bezos says if you have an experiment, you have to be willing to fail. Because if you're doing an experiment and you're not going to fail, it's not an experiment. And that is a cultural um, imperative at Amazon. Employees are encouraged to try something new, understanding that it may not work, and that's okay. Now, I always have to pause when I say that and say that Amazon has an intolerance for incompetence. So they don't tolerate just anything, but it's thoughtful, it's purposeful, it's strategic risk taking. So those experiments lead to inventing on behalf of the customer. And again, that's a key idea at Amazon. And once you invent on behalf of the customer, then you can innovate that invention and continue to make it grow, improve it. And the Kindle ebook reader is a great example of that. They created something different for customers. And there were ebook readers, electronic readers, before the Kindle came along. But it's hard to remember back then, but those readers had to be plugged into a computer to transfer the book. What was the invention? The idea that, and here was the goal for creating that reader. Any book in the world, in 60 seconds or less, you could start reading. Because that reader was connected not just to Wi-Fi, which could be in and out. Again, remember, this is the early 2000s. Wi-Fi wasn't like it is today. It was connected to the cellular data network. So anywhere you had a cell phone signal, you could download and start reading a book on a Kindle. That's what made it revolutionary. And
Totally
it all
agree.
started with experimenting and being willing to test, fail, try again.
Totally agree, Mr. Steve. And don't be afraid to fail, people, because you're gonna learn from those failure. What do you think Bezos' annual letters resonate so deeply with entrepreneurs and business leaders?
Well, again, I said before, people are curious how he did it. Starting literally like any other entrepreneur with an idea, crazy idea at the time, right? 1995, the internet was barely something, and he realized or had the vision for uh, originally selling books online and then expanded it out from there. And now virtually anything you can buy from Amazon and have it delivered when? A couple hours, a day, 2 days. So low prices, wide selection, fast delivery are three pillars of customer success at Amazon. So those should be of interest to any entrepreneur. And so, I think that's why. And I always want to remind people that Bezos started literally on his hands and knees in a garage in Bellevue, Washington, taking books that he had gotten from a warehouse that people had ordered, putting them in a package, driving them to the post office, and mailing them off. So you may not want to be as big as Amazon, and you may probably won't be another Amazon, but that doesn't mean you can't serve the customers that you have and the employees that you have well by learning from what Bezos did.
Indeed, extraordinary entrepreneur. What's the first steps for a small business to adopt Amazon's principles without sacrificing their unique culture?
So I'm going to go back to successful failure just for a moment, then I'm going to talk about one or two others. The idea is, and you had said this, Daniel, don't be afraid of failure, but too many businesses actually punish failure. And so I believe employees actually aren't afraid of failure, but they are afraid of the consequences of failure. What's going to happen to my career? What's going to happen? Those kinds of things. So the business owner needs to create a culture where stupid failure, no, but intentional strategic failure, yes. So I know I'm hammering on that one. I think that's really important. I think the other one is in the build cycle, which is obsess over customers. Now, every business out there, every business listening knows they need to take care of customers. If you don't have customers, you don't have a business. But Bezos talked about obsessing over customers. And I think that's a different view, a different take. So we talk about customer service, customer journey, customer focus, but obsessing over customers takes it to a different level and always thinking about the customer. And a favorite phrase of Bezos was, we invent on behalf of the customer. At Amazon, they know their customers' wants, needs, and desires so deeply, they can invent things that their customers don't even know they want. But once they see it, will gravitate to it. And we've got lots of examples of that. I just mentioned the Prime membership and 2-day or less shipping. That comes out of customer obsession. One of the barriers to people buying on Amazon in the early days was it took time. 2 days, 3 days, sometimes a week in the very early days for something they bought online to get to them. And so continually obsessing over delivery time, building out the logistics infrastructure, and being able to get packages as quickly as possible to people when they order is a key focus. And again, a key reason Amazon has been so successful.
Indeed, successful in their strategies. Many companies struggle with long term thinking. What tactics can help leaders prioritize over short term gains?
Certainly in the US, there is a real focus, especially for public companies, on short-term quarterly profits. Bezos said in that very first 1997 letter to shareholders that they will focus at Amazon on long-term gains and sacrifice short-term profit, short-term gains, but thinking of the long term. And we've again have lots of examples of that. I mean, Prime membership, fast delivery, that took many years to build out and cost a lot of money to build out. But Bezos was focused on the long-term goal of serving customers. And I'm going to relate that to another principle, which is understand your flywheel. So the flywheel is a concept that Jim Collins, a business author, talked about in his book, Good to Great. And the chapter 8, it's called The Flywheel and the Doom Loop. And actually, Collins came to Amazon to a offsite senior leadership team retreat and spent a whole day just talking about the flywheel concept. And that's a long-term thinking. So the flywheel, if you think about it, typically it's a big metal wheel that takes a lot of energy to get going. But once it gets going, it takes less energy to keep it going. Well, the concept for business in a flywheel is, what are the inputs necessary to keep your business running smoothly? And for Amazon, it really was those 3 pillars. It was having a friction-free or less friction website experience. Now, remember, in the early days, the internet speed was slow, the web was slow. So Amazon spent billions of dollars trying to make sure that experience was as good as possible. When people have a good experience, they talk about it. Amazon did actually not much advertising in the beginning. So when more people talked about how easy it was to shop online, more people came. More people came to shop online. That gave Amazon more leverage with manufacturers to lower prices. They could order bigger quantities, they could get better pricing. Those lower prices kept bringing people in. So now we have kind of two inputs. And then the fast delivery also. So all of those inputs in the flywheel kept their growth going. And I think businesses that understand their flywheel can work on that. It's a hard concept to get your head around, and hard to implement, but really important. So both of those are long-term thinking. What can I build today that will pay off? Maybe not for a few years. So in the early days of Amazon, they plowed profits back into building, and that paid off long term. But here's what Bezos said. He said, if it's better for customers, it will be better for Amazon and ultimately better for our shareholders. And so that's that long-term thinking concept. And Bezos, that's just part of who he was. I mean, his whole idea of going to space, right? So a whole separate idea here, but that's been a long-term vision of his, actually, since he was in high school.
So, Mr. Steve, as an author and a best-selling and award-winning, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
Well, my short-term goal is actually I'm working on an update to the book. So I said it was published in the fall of 2019. So it's about 5 years old. Numbers and other things need to be updated. Bezos has stepped aside as CEO. And so I'm working on really refreshing the book with current information and new examples of how these principles continue to work. Long-term goal, I have an idea for another book that once I get the update done, I will start working on. But the brief idea for the book is there are a lot of tools that Amazon used to implement the principles. And so this book talks about the principles. I'm thinking the next book will talk about, okay, practically, how do we go about thinking about these principles and implementing them within any type or size of organization?
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Steve. And what personal lesson from studying Bezos and Amazon has most impacted your own approach to business?
Oh gosh, there are so many. So I would, successful failure, obsess over customers. I would say a third one we didn't talk too much about, but it's called generate high velocity decisions. One of the problems as a business grows is they add layers of management. And sometimes you need it, but sometimes that slows growth down. So Bezos talked a lot about making fast decisions. And again, that's tied back to successful failure. If you make a decision and you find out it's not working the way you thought it was, most decisions could be walked back and changed. And so I think all of those are really important. And I think the final one, which is principle 14, is believe it's always day one. And that's a concept Bezos started literally in that very first 1997 letter, where he said it's day one for the internet and for Amazon.com if we execute well. That day one mindset is always thinking like a startup, always moving forward, keeping that excitement of those first days that you opened your business. And Amazon wants to be the world's largest startup. So that encapsulates several of the things that I've taken away.
Mr. Steve, how can legacy companies with enhanced hierarchies adopt Bezos' decentralized decision making approach?
So he describes the decision making. There's two doors. That's what he calls them. Door one are big decisions that really are consequential to the company, meaning they're not easily reversible. Type two is what I described, decisions that are easily reversible. he says the problem is most businesses, especially as they grow, treat all decisions as type 1 when they should be treated as type 2. And even at Amazon right now, over the last year, they've been working on reducing kind of that middle management layer. So there's more direct interaction, and people have the authority to make decisions, understanding that they could be different or changed. So I think as a company grows, kind of past the startup stage, keeping in mind that the people you hire for their expertise. So let them use that expertise and make those decisions, as they continue to work on growing the company.
Mr. Steve, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, book 101 review in fifth season, comedy 101 in second season, and food 101 in fifth season too. Geography 101 in its fourth season, love letters in third season, and my baby podcast Mental Health 101, movie 101 review and music 101 in fourth season, and science 101 and sex 101 in each first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcasts. So, Mr. Steve, if you could add a 15th principle to the book today, what would it be and why?
Hmm. That's actually a hard question for me to answer, Daniel, because um, what would I add to the book? That's actually I'm working on updating the book. That actually
Yes.
is the problem, because um, there's not a lot of content I want to take out of the book. It's still relevant, and I would say here's maybe one that I've been toying with. Now that I think about it a minute, Bezos stepped aside as CEO.
Yes.
He could have stayed there. He stepped aside as CEO in 2020. He's executive chairman, so he's still involved, one of the largest shareholders, right? All of that. But he turned over the reins to Andy Jassy, who's now CEO. Um, and maybe the principle is something like ultimate success is succession. Ultimate success for a business is, how do I turn it over from the founder to somebody else and continue to have it grow and build? So ultimate success as a founder may be how you create a succession plan.
Very well said, Mr. Steve. Very well said. Bezos emphasizes high velocity decision making. How can leaders balance speed with the risk of poor decisions?
Um, Again, and this is a good example of how the principles stand on their own, but they interact with one another too. So again, if you have built a culture of successful failure, meaning you can make decisions and change them if you need, that allows higher velocity decisions. And if you create a internal infrastructure that has barriers, so I have to get approval from my supervisor has to get approval from the director or the manager. If you limit those barriers and let the person with the skill necessary to make the decisions, it doesn't matter to some degree if they're wrong, because it can be changed. So again, the idea of the two-way door, the image is, if you walk through that door and you look on the other side, meaning you made that decision, you look, it's not like you thought it was going to be, or new information came, or you didn't think about something, then you can turn around, either pivot or literally turn back and try something different. Now, given that, I want to talk about one tool. I'll turn to it really briefly for you. Amazon created a process called originally the 6-page memo. It's now called more typically the working backward document. 2004, Jeff Bezos sent an email to senior leadership team and said, no longer will any presentation have a PowerPoint associated with it. He said, people hide behind PowerPoint. You will, if you need a decision in a meeting, you will write a maximum 6-page memo about the decision, what it is, why you need it, how it will benefit customers ultimately, what are the things you know, what are the things you don't know but need more information, and literally print it out, not sent to people in the meeting beforehand. The first 5, 10, probably 15, maybe 30 minutes of a meeting is everybody sitting there reading the document. Now, what that does, Bezos says, is one, executives are busy. They say they'll read it beforehand, they don't. So we'll take a study hall. Everybody reads that document, so we're all on literally the same page. And then we open it for discussions and questions and comments. It's the idea of slowing down to speed up, right? Takes more time, but actually the meeting probably takes less time than all the back and forth and the questions and those kinds of things. And the person calling the meeting, if they have to actually write it out and not wing it on a PowerPoint, it will be more thoughtful, it'll be more specific, it'll have better information. And one of the keys at Amazon today for advancement is how well you can write. And a 6-page memo is that one of those key documents. But that forces people to think more deeply about what it is they're proposing and how they're going to make it happen.
Mr. Steve, did you compare Mr. Bezos to other successful entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk?
Yes. So I would say, first of all, is most CEOs' letters to shareholders aren't worth reading. They tout the company, they tout, whatever they're trying to talk about the company. Bezos certainly did that, but like I said, he also talked about how they did it. And I put Bezos in the same category as Warren Buffett and his shareholder. People wait for that shareholder letter from Warren Buffett to come out. I put it in the same category of thinking and counterintuitive as Steve Jobs. And maybe even Elon Musk, in terms of Bezos didn't do business the way everyone else did. He was very counterintuitive. He was just like banning PowerPoint. I don't know of any other large organization that has done that. But it worked for them because of his mindset and the way he thought about thinking deeply about projects, even down to the minutia that people need to do. So I definitely think, he certainly should be among those we look at as good examples of how to build and run and grow a business.
Indeed, Mr. Steve Anderson, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and knowledge to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books? Mr. Steve?
I'm sorry, say that again. I missed it.
Yes, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
So the book that you've very graciously shown the cover is certainly available on Amazon. The book website is stevebezosletters.com. And connecting with me, LinkedIn is my primary platform. So Steve Anderson Insurance or Steve Anderson Bezos, you should find me. Connect with me. Let me know you listen to this podcast. I'd be glad to connect with you and help any way I can.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Steve Anderson because if you support him, more and more award winning and best selling books to come. So, Mr. Steve, Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
Bodycon people, see you soon.